Warning. This episode contains graphic language, depictions of violence, bad horse care, creepy infatuation, and as always, teen angst. Also, there will be spoilers for chapter 42 through 47 of Eragon, Book 1 of the Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Listen at your own risk.
Is this a podcast, or is this just fantasy? We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. So join us if you want to nerd out. Time to start the podcast and see. Anyway, here's the show.
Hello, readers. I'm Dane Patterson, the host who would have peaced out from the hike alone with a guy I hardly know through a desert being chased by monsters and instead would have gone for a soda and a sundae.
It's absolutely brutal for our main character, Eragon, but I can't deny the draw of a good sundae. I'm clearly an ice cream queen. But my name is Jacqui Lanier, and is this a podcast or is this just fantasy? The podcast where the horses might be constantly on the brink of collapse, but at least we have the threat of accidental magical suicide to keep us company.
So nice.
Yeah, it's a lovely book for just like forming young adults.
Well, on that note, if you'd like to support us, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on our social media at Is This Just Fantasy Pod on TikTok or at Just Fantasy Pod on Instagram and Twitter.
That's us. And don't forget, we don't just live here in the dark void of wherever you like to enjoy your podcasts, your chosen streaming platform. We actually have our own website on the internet, too. Mm-hmm. You can visit us at isthisjustfantasypod.com to find out some incredibly secret personal information about our lives, which we've posted online. And also you can buy the merch we made if you're into that sort of thing. And just take it from me, a person you know and trust. Mm-hmm. You should be into that sort of thing. It's cool merch. Yeah. I love it.
A person you know and trust, buy it.
Yeah. I mean.
No, I do. I actually really like our water bottles. I'm not gonna lie.
Thank
I've been
you.
using this tumbler and I'm enjoying it thoroughly.
I like it.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's a statement. Bold. Graphic.
Like you. Bold. Graphic.
Well, graphic, sure. Bold.
Not a word to describe you?
No, depends on the day, but usually no. Almost always no. Let's just take a quick look back. So fast. That's me. Of what we read through on the last episode because it was meaty. There was a lot there.
Okay, let's do it.
Yes. The last section opened with the death that absolutely rocked us. Pour wine on the Gedweg nausea of a real one because we lost the baddest ass, absolutely not a storyteller, Brom.
Hell yeah.
Before he left us on our own, Brom gave us some appropriately epic deathbed confessions and whispers a few final words of the ancient language to Eragon before he embarks on, in Brom's own final words, the greatest adventure of all.
So good. Let's start playing taps, Kevin.
No.
Burr, burr, burr.
Dane, a man is dead.
Oh, okay, fine.
Jesus.
But you know I love a very tone-deaf funeral around here.
That's true. That's sadly a part of our brand now.
That's what we do.
You're not wrong, but I'm going for concise in this recap.
Okay.
So in the fallout after Brom's death, Eragon and Saphira are stranded in the wilderness with a mysterious and murderous teen heartthrob named Murtag. Our new bestie is really the new MVP, doing all the hunting and cooking and insisting on traveling with Eragon and Saphira to look out for them while Eragon heals from his Razak attack. And what a good guy.
And heals his heart from the loss of his mentor.
It's true. Oh, and apparently, no big deal. He's also on the run from the Empire and the law and is looking to exact his own shadowy revenge on the Razak.
You know, nothing, just low-key stuff.
Very, very, very cool. So after Eragon and Saphira bury Brom, turn his tomb into some freaking diamonds, this new crew, our new little crew, decide to hit the road to look up another old friend of Brom's in the Empire stronghold of Gilead. During the few weeks it takes to travel there, Eragon and Murtag bond in the only way that makes sense to teen boys, by crossing swords. And they studiously avoid finding out anything personal about each other, but they do spend plenty of time admiring each other's prowess during sparring sessions because, of course, their sword skills are perfectly matched. They're like exactly the same.
It's like, you're just a hot, sweaty dude working his sword, and I'm just a hot, sweaty dude working my sword.
Besties.
Like dudes.
Yes. And the similarities actually don't stop there, because much like Eragon and his grandpa horse, Caddock, Murtagh also has named a horse after a beloved real human man, his old swordmaster Tornak. So they're just two guys traveling along on horses named after people.
Yeah.
What is with these weirdos?
I have no idea.
Yeah. But at the end of their long road full of sword fighting and processing grief, obsessing about Eragon's like dream lady prisoner, and revealing that everything new we learn about Murtagh is cooler than the last thing we learned about Murtagh.
Amen to that.
Yes, they're rewarded with all hell breaking loose pretty much as soon as they arrive at Gilead. They set up a base camp outside the city, have like the semblance of a good plan to send Murtagh in so Eragon isn't recognized, to meet up with a man named Dormnad, which gotta love
I'm
it.
kind of sad when you get to meet this guy, because
know.
Dormnad, I imagine, had to be an interesting character.
Justice for Dormnad, bring him back, Paolini. I want to meet that guy. But unfortunately, Murtagh's recognized in the city by some random snitch, and that night they're ambushed by Urgles, and Eragon is dragged to a prison inside the city.
Rough.
Cut to a whole ass prison break plot. Yes.
Hell yeah.
In this section of chapters that starts with a tragic death,
Yeah.
it wraps up with
A prison break.
flight from a prison.
Yeah, this book has it all, everybody.
That's correct. But after another concussion, I think the fourth at this point, Eragon wakes up drugged and disoriented, but he still feels like the luckiest boy in the whole world, because you know who is, of course, also in this prison, Dane?
Who?
His dream girl.
Oh.
Prisoner lovers. So Eragon decides he has to get himself, his bestie, and some random hot stranger the hell out of Dodge. After a couple days refusing his poison food, he's weak but unable to unlock his cell door with magic, which is great. And as soon as he's out of his cell, he runs into Murtagh on the way to rescue him. These two really are just like perfect for each other. Totally on the same wavelength. So they grab their weapons, jailbreak the strange...
But hot.
Yes, of course hot. Always hot. The strange but hot woman that Kevin is obsessed with. And they're almost to their airlift when the Shade, who we saw in the prologue, happens to be the warden of this prison.
Yikes.
Surprise. The Shade finds them. Eragon tries to fight the Shade to buy Saphira time to get to them, but he realizes quickly that he's no match for the Shade's like inhuman strength and skill. Not great.
Yeah.
But Saphira brings the house down, literally, just in time. She breaks through the roof of the prison, like right as the Shade is disarming Eragon, has our guy on his knees. And as they mount Saphira to get the fuck out this prison, Murtagh fires 2 arrows, nailing the Shade between the eyes. The Shade vanishes to become like Schrodinger's Shade for the foreseeable future.
That's the one with the
gun. But there's no time to dwell on that, because Saphira takes to the skies amid a rain of arrows, and that's where we are now. That's it. We're on flight.
It's funny that with the angst, the creepy love here, the moral debates we're going to get, this section is by far my least favorite of the book.
Boo.
I know it's shocking, because I really do love the new emo swordsman that we get out of all of this. But this is a slow section of the book for me.
Yeah. Okay. I'll admit, like, this is it feels a little like Nothing Burger travel chaptery to me. It's kind of scattered plot wise.
Yeah. And since like what, chapter 6, we've been on the road.
Yeah.
It's chapter like, we go through chapter 47.
I mean, a couple
here.
important stops on the way. That's a little since chapter 6.
They stopped to break out of jail. They stopped to do a heist.
Plot. We had a rich friend. We learned to read. You're the worst. They've done other stuff. But it does feel, I think, in this section, like a little bit more of a slog maybe, because I'm dying to get where we're going. So the drawn out journey part is starting to get hard, especially when this time we don't get a sweet training montage with it.
Yeah.
It's a bummer. We love a training montage.
Yeah, I love a training.
I know.
It's great.
But I guess when I look at it, like this section, the kind of nothing travel chapters were basically an entire book of the Wheel of Time series.
That's true.
And here it's like the ones that seem really like nothing exposition or world building is happening.
Yeah.
This section we're about to get into, this is like 5 chapters, not a whole book. So I'm not as mad about it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up some important points there. I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah. What I will say I'm not the most impressed by is that the second important female character we've had in the whole series so far spends her introduction to the story being literal deadweight. Like, just come on, Chris. It's a tough look for you, my guy. Why can't we have a live woman who like talks and influences the plot?
Look,
and is fun.
Jacqui, it was the early aughts. Things were different. All right, women need saving by men back then. You know.
Do I know?
Anyway, let's get to these chapters before Jax kills me. Chapter 42, a warrior and a healer, hot off the jailbreak. Just gonna keep reading.
Yes.
Saphira lands the fugitives in a clearing where the horses are waiting to be tied up. Eragon's healing skills are getting better. He's able to remove the arrow from Saphira's wing, quickly heals her. Once she's healed, she takes off with the elf, and Murtagh and Eragon hit the open road, the dusty trail.
Two bros just sailing out into the sunset.
Vindicated is playing my dashboard confession.
A regular Thelma and Louise day, and
Yeah.
I hope it ends better for them.
I hope so too. They ride through dawn, stopping only because they're exhausted. Murtagh explains, and I don't know how he knows this, but that this is the only elf that this is the first one that Galbatorix has captured. And he goes on to give us some information here, which I had totally forgotten. He says that Galbatorix does not know where the elves are.
Oh, okay.
So he can't invade them. He can't move his armies around. And we learned that here. I don't know how Murtagh knows that, but he does.
Murtagh knows everything.
I know, he's so cool.
He's our younger, hotter Braum.
Yeah, just moves his hair. Eragon also confirms the Urgals are under Galbatorix's control. And when he talks shit to their leader a few chapters back.
Yes.
He was talking about old crazy genociding Gal.
Oh.
So when that Urgal was like, "All master rules the skies" and all that stuff.
Like what?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, that's my Urgal voice.
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
Let's definitely keep that up. No, that is crazy. Like, we thought it would be bad. We thought the Urgal's master had to be a big bad. We thought maybe it was the Shade because of the prologue. But if it's the insane murder wizard dragon rider, that's extra bad that Eragon was just like, fuck all y'all. And
fuck your
the
master
boss
particularly.
You serve. Yeah. So not great.
It's not great.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, back to the teens. Eragon points out that if the regular people knew that Galbatorix was leading the Urgals, they would rebel and join the rebel organization Varden group. Murtagh explains to Eragon that with the combined might of Galbatorix, he's a regular standing army. He's army of Urgals. He can completely control the border and keep anyone from joining the Varden in mass. There's like going to be no mass exodus.
Yes.
To like join the Varden.
Plus, think about the way this is working right now. Like everywhere they've been so far in the Empire, people have been talking about the chaos that's everywhere. The bandits on the road, the disappearances, the Urgals that have been raiding villages.
Yeah.
Like, it clearly is a building problem that I can't imagine people under that kind of oppression already. Like, sure, Eragon thinks they'd rebel.
Right.
But that doesn't happen very often in real life history, does it? Like, you're
No.
if you're in an oppressed state, you're probably going to believe the strong man who says he can save you.
It's hard in a monarchy regardless, especially like a feudalistic spread out peasantry, agricultural society.
Everybody can be America and overthrow their monarch from across an ocean.
We start to see what I think is interesting here is we're starting to see that Murtagh has a completely different worldview than anyone we've met until now. He points out that the Vard and the elves can be, with very little effort, portrayed to the average citizens as the enemies here. With that in mind, it isn't a stretch that Galbatorix could raise an army against the Varden and the elves and pitch the Urgals as like misunderstood victims of history coming to help their, Galbatorix, the great leader. You know what I mean? The average folk don't know much and believe mostly what Galbatorix tells them. He is the Senate. Sorry, wrong story.
Oh, did you forget? You just got lost in your
I am the one who knocks.
Okay.
Anyway, sorry. Okay, Eragon quickly realized that the elf is covered in scabs and bruises.
Not great.
It is mentioned she has been beaten, whipped, and branded with hot pokers. Saphira gives Eragon strength, and Eragon starts to heal the elf. It gets a little creepy here, a little uncomfortable, when Eragon starts to notice how hot she is. But I mean, he's an awkward teen, so I guess he says with trepidation, this kind of makes sense.
Does it make sense, Dane? I knew you as an awkward teen, and I'd rather not think over long about that hot take of yours.
I mean, Eragon has come a long way in Magic, Jax, and that is all I could say in the defense, because I for sure think it's kind of weird. But
I'm a pick at it a little later,
yeah,
just to let you know.
I do think it's weird. As a
Yes.
firm stance, I also felt uncomfortable, but I don't know.
It's not great,
Yeah.
but I'll circle back. That does take us to chapter 43, Water from Sand. In some ways, Eragon has come a long way in what he can do. In other ways, he'll always be a bean farmer.
Yeah.
In this chapter, he does just a quintessential Kevin move and nearly kills himself doing some dumb magic.
Yeah.
Again. I know. So it starts with our crew finally regrouping, like getting some sleep, assessing their options. Everyone's tired and cranky from spending basically 2 straight days fighting for their lives and like riding at breakneck speeds to get away from the Empire, whoever they might send, to chase them down. They can't keep the pace up, frankly. They know this, and the soldiers are gaining on them anyway. Even if they could keep up this pace, it's still not working.
Yeah.
And they don't really have a good end in sight. All their bad options, let me just lay them out for you real quick. All their bad options include, 1, going to the forest of Du Weldenvarden to try to beg shelter from the elves. With the elf they kidnapped or jailbroke, still unconscious.
Yeah, who knows?
She's still unconscious. It's unclear like why they're dragging her body and they want to go confront her people. Seems dicey. But even with her unconscious, it would be impossible to find the elves. They're ultra secretive and the woods are endless and dangerous. And even if she were awake, Murtagh has no faith that she'd even tell them where the elves are.
Yeah.
And they think too, because Galbatorix was a human rider and did a genocide of all the other riders, which included a lot of elves.
And the dragons, right?
Yes, and the dragons. Murtagh points out, I think rightly, that like the elves may not want another human rider in their midst. They might still be just like a little peeved about the whole genocide misunderstanding. And
maybe.
Yes. And also, if they're going to attempt to escape north up to the forest, they'd have to go back past Gilead. Like they're already headed south. So they would have to turn right around. And the Razak are sure to be on the way to Gilead after this whole like prison break
Just
debacle.
flip a bitch.
Yeah,
just flip a bitch.
Flip a quick U-turn. It'll be fine. So that's option 1, not great. Option 2 is that they could continue going south to escape the Empire into neighboring Serta. They might be able to find the Varden there. It's been like rumored that Serta supports the Varden, but they would have to cross essentially the entire empire full of towns and cities. They're fugitives. There's already wanted posters. So that would be their trek down to Serta. And Eragon might like love a disguise. He might be into like acting, but I wouldn't say he's like great at avoiding notice.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, also at this point, Eragon will be traveling across the entire coast of this empire if he did this. He would have gone like basically the full length.
Yes, I don't think this is like what we'd consider a viable option for him. So the third and final option to the east of them is the unfathomable expanse of the Hatterack Desert. It's hot, it's dry, it's full of nothing except for plants and animals that actively want to kill you, like poison things, bitey things. So basically they'd need to cross like an entire Australia to get away from the Empire. But in theory, the Empire's border ends at the desert, so they'd be beyond Galbatorix's grasp, allegedly.
Gotcha.
And also, allegedly, the Varden is based in the Bior Mountains on the other side of the desert. So the boys in Saphira are feeling weirdly like this is their least shitty option if they tack a course through like a corner of the desert, not necessarily the whole thing, and then follow the Bior Mountains until they happen upon some hint of how to find the Varden.
I mean, it makes sense what they're saying, but I feel like this is discounting a lot of the dangers of a desert.
It's super dangerous.
Like they didn't get provisions for a desert.
No, they didn't get any provisions. They barely got their asses out the jail.
Yeah.
So just one tiny hiccup that Murtagh insists is a deal breaker for this plan. They don't have water. It's not that just like they don't have desert provisions. They don't have any water, which
it's a little hiccup.
Might be a problem in a month-long journey through a desert. So Murtagh is being a real buzzkill about this, but never fear, Kevin to the rescue. Eragon and Saphira take a quick sidebar. Eragon decides he needs to find a way to like turn sand into water, and whips up a quick experiment with a tiny amount of dirt in his palm. He like abracadabras it up. He's immediately consumed by a runaway train of magic energy leaving his body that he does not have the ability to put the brakes on.
Yep, he started it. He's got to finish it.
Yes, it's very, very bad. He's just starting to panic that this is how it ends for old Kev. But by whatever force it is in this universe and our own universe that keeps Kevin's failing up, the spell ends just before it ends him. So... typical. Eragon's left with a thimble full of water and a tidal wave of angst that he almost died doing something that clearly won't sustain them across this entire desert.
I mean, Brom would have slapped the shit out of him for this one. Like, this is the dumbest shit. Just even in conception.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds dumb. Like, how much energy would it take to turn one thing into another?
Fully into another thing. Just transmute matter.
Come on, dude.
I know. But thankfully, Eragon's only known coping mechanism at this point is drawing sad little pictures in the dirt with like sticks.
Why me?
I know. And as he's pouting and like drawing the Palancar Valley in the dirt at his feet, he realizes the holes he's making with his stick in the ground are moist.
He just makes like a stick figure of Darrow, crosses him out.
Yeah.
Stick figure of Brom. Crosses him out. Sorry.
I mean, fair though, but this is leading him to realize like he doesn't need to turn sand in the water or sand into water. He just needs to be able to bring the groundwater that's already there up to the surface.
Oh, like you do.
Move some stuff from one place to another.
Yeah.
So Saphira like gives him a little boosty for his strength because obviously he was as exhausted after palm full of water.
Yeah.
Saphira boosts his strength and he already has no doubts that this is going to be a perfect plan.
I mean, he might not have doubts, but after that performance, I certainly do have doubts.
It actually does work for them though, which is nice. And he's just like, Murtagh, bud, I did it. We're going to make it. And
sweating and pale.
Yes, like confident in the way only a 16-year-old boy can be. And Murtagh and Saphira do have a couple reservations, but they decide they're gonna like fuck it, risk it.
They're like, sure, it's just our lives.
Fuck it, let's do it live.
That takes us to chapter 44, the Remmer River. They start this chapter by like sitting the elf in first class, and by this I mean first class is tied to Saphira's belly.
Oh,
yeah, that
seems not comfortable. Is she face up or face down?
You're asking the wrong question. She's in first class. I don't know which way she is. I don't even know if she's up or upside down. I don't know if she's facing forward or back.
It seems uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, I just imagine like two teenagers are in control of this. So
that's true. Yeah. I'm surprised she's alive at all.
Seems super risky and dangerous to me, but hey, she's unconscious.
Oh, great.
They push the horses hard and have to avoid the villages and people along the way, as somehow news of their escape got ahead of them, and even they like dodge ambushes.
Yeah.
So it has me thinking, is Galbatorix or the Shade, you think, like sending messages in with magic ahead? Are they like sending runners? Is this a Ravens, Game of Thrones, scroll leg situation? What do we got going on?
I don't know. I mean... possibilities abound in Magic Land. So like, I have no idea. I do think there would be other like real world options here. Like we could totally have some sort of signal fire chain situation.
That's right.
Much like Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Or I think it's possible they could have sent messengers on horseback if the soldiers didn't have to worry about like avoiding the main roads the way our crew does, or changing horses or riders at each town. Like I think they could probably outpace our merry little band of fugitives.
It's a good thing you're here because that makes perfect sense, actually.
I got your back.
Yeah, Eragon claims. Now this is where things get a little crazy here. Eragon claims they cover over 16 leagues, which is 48 miles in one day.
Yeah.
This is technically not possible with today's horses. I looked this up because I wanted to see how impressive this is. Google tells me that 30 to 35 miles was the norm in the past with how horses could move, but most horses now only get about 25 miles. It did. They don't make them like they used to. It did say a really in shape.
Make horses great again.
Yeah, bunch of cats.
They're not built Ford tough.
Yeah, they're not Ford tough. These aren't American horses. It did say a really in shape horse could go 50 miles.
Ooh.
So it seems like it is technically possible, I guess. But man, these guys are going really fast for 3 full days on the run at this point.
Yeah.
The boy band gets to the Rama River and they need to cross it.
Mm-hmm.
They really don't want to kill the horses by having Saphira trying to take them across by like carrying them in her claws, but it becomes apparent that it really is their only place. Like it's like their only option to do this.
Airlift.
Yeah, so they find a place to cross, and ultimately Murtagh and the elf go first.
Mm-hmm.
And Eragon...
Con Air, if you will.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly it. It's the movie Airplane on fucking Saphira.
No. I prefer, in my headcanon, it's more Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage.
Con Air, a masterpiece.
It would be great if when Disney Plus makes a show, cast everyone else is age specific, and then Murtagh is Nicolas Cage.
I would watch the shit out of that tape.
So funny. Anyway, ultimately Murtagh and the elf go first, and Eragon stays back to load up the horses one at a time. Saphira comes back and grabs these horses with her claws, which is insane.
Yes.
What an image. Eragon tries and like to calm down the horses with his mind, but they scream and fight and make lots of noise.
Horses, am I right?
Yeah, it's just like, come on. Tornak has to be tied down on the other side. He's so upset.
Yeah.
The soldiers, which are around them, hear this.
Like closing in.
Yeah, they start to
basically.
come towards Eragon and Saphira, but they have some time to spare. They can see them in the distance coming their direction.
Yeah.
But they ride on, falling asleep in their saddles that night, and by the end, they make it to the desert.
That's crazy.
They're in such a bind, these poor dudes. The Jonas brothers never had to go through this.
Like this boy band here.
Yeah, like this boy band is getting
They're
rough.
no Joe Bros, but to be fair, the Jonas brothers also had a Kevin to contend with.
Is there a Kevin in the Jonas brothers?
Yes. You're the one who brought them up.
Oh, I just am a fan of the Jonas brothers.
But you don't know any of their names?
Okay,
Kevin,
I might
Nick,
not
and
be a
Joe?
fan. It might be one of the only boy bands that I know it's like still around.
Just stick with NSYNC, old man.
Oh my God.
Listen, Grandpa.
Okay, well, bye. Move on with your chapter 45.
Well played. So that takes us to chapter 45, the Hatterack Desert. I'll give you 3 guesses what this one's about. 2 of them don't count. This chapter starts in a familiar spot.
Okay.
Our heroes are sleep deprived. They're crabby. They're on the run, and they're on the edge of a vast desert. As it turns out, the chapter ends in pretty much the exact same place.
Okay.
But in between, they make their way like hot and angry across the corner of this absurdly big desert. So Saphira, interestingly, is like very into this locale. Like she loves the heat. It's kind of cute. I'm like, oh, she's like a lizard.
Yeah.
Which is also a thing I say about myself when I
When you love the heat?
when I go like swimming and stuff, I like to like lay on the hot cement. Do you remember doing that as a kid? Like getting out of the
No.
pool and laying on the hot cement?
No.
No?
I sweat inside the pool. I don't want to be in hotter situations.
Okay, fair.
I'm like the Hulk. That's my secret. I'm always hot. All right.
Okay, well, Saphira and I have more in common than Saphira and you.
Okay, well, that's fine. I'm a Murtagh man myself.
We know. But so Saphira loves this. She loves the heat. She loves that, like, because it's so desolate, you have to be a very skilled hunter to eat. She's like, again, very proud, very like confident. And then she also has endless open space for flying, which obviously is great for a dragon.
For a dragon, yeah.
Eragon's mostly amazed by everything and pretty self-satisfied that his plan with the water is working. So he's actually not that mad.
Yeah, he's like riding on a high. He's like, look at what I'm doing.
He's like, it's not great, but there are worse things. And like, wow, look at the landscape. He's like, I've never seen anything like this before. But Murtagh, damn, your boy is having a tough row to hoe. He hates it out here. He's like snappy with everybody. He's very irritable with all the wind and the dust and the constant threat of pursuit. He's cracking up out here on the desert. And don't forget about the elf, the other member of our party.
Yeah.
She's still out cold.
She might be out cold, but Paolini made it clear she ain't cold. She hot.
Oh, God. Anyway, Eragon and Saphira spend a lot of time trying to figure out if they know like any conceivable way to help this elf. But the best they can do is get her to Serta or the Varden and find anyone else who might have healing skills a little bit above Eragon's pay grade here.
Yeah.
And on their second day in the desert, Eragon notices some like confusing forms on the horizon, like sweet baby bean farmer. He cannot for his life tell that they're mountains, Dane. It's giving me like major, why is everything green vibes? Like, don't they have winter here?
Are you a she?
Yes.
Am I going blind?
I'm like, Eragon. They're just mountains on the horizon. You're from a mountain range.
You're literally from a valley.
But jokes aside, actually, I clown on this, obviously. But I really like the way Eragon, it's not just Eragon.
Yeah.
I guess that's why I like it.
Yeah.
Because it's not only him. He, Saphira, and Murtagh all put the pieces together kind of independently about what these like blurred forms on the horizon are.
Yeah.
And they come to the realization that what they're looking at are foothills that are so tall that the mountains behind them, which are snow-capped, they've all mistaken for a white sky behind these foothills. Can you like picture that?
Yeah, it's wild.
Crazy.
That's
so
huge.
I like
and I'm
that.
from Colorado, right? I can see the Rockies always.
Yeah.
That must be enormous.
Absolutely nuts. They're so far away, and all of this stuff is still so like gargantuan in scale that like they're and I like the way they all kind of talk. It's Eragon and Saphira through their mind meld, and then like in a little chat with Murtagh later, they're realizing what it is they're looking at. So I think that's kind of fun.
It is kind of fun.
Yes. And sure, it's a little silly, but it does drive the point home about how big these mountains are. So well done, Chris.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
It's working.
Yeah, these are magically large. You know, they're huge.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only category you could put here is epic.
Yeah.
And they're all very much looking forward to making it out of the desert since kind of the end is in sight. And like by some miracle.
You say miracle, I say utter disregard for the way distances are.
Yeah, a miracle. That's fair. But by this miracle, they've made it to the foothills by the end of the second evening of their trek through the desert, and that's where this chapter wraps up.
Which takes us to chapter 46, A Path Revealed.
The names are so dramatic. Is this
know.
just us? Is this because we're cracking up in this room?
Yeah, seriously. I love these chapter titles right now.
Yes.
The start of this chapter is all about how far they've gone, and I have to say it is super impressive and strikes me a little bit crazy.
No.
They have gone 180 miles in 5 days. That's 35 miles a day through a desert with an unconscious woman without proper provisions and having to avoid being caught by soldiers or ambushes early on.
Yeah.
I have to say,
fine.
that's super impressive, but these horses have to be magical, right?
I mean, there's always the possibility that naming a horse after a real life human man grants it special powers, Dane. You don't know.
I mean,
have you ever named a horse after your grandpa? Where's good Jerry horse?
Yeah, where's Jerry?
Jerry.
Where's Jerry and Bob?
Yes.
My horses.
If you had, maybe they wouldn't have died so early on.
Well, I definitely would have an American horse.
You heard it here first. Dane is a horse killer.
Yeah, oh God. No, that's just IKEA and their meatballs, right? Anyway, they are
Shots
far.
fired.
I know, my gosh, I'm
At
going
IKEA.
after people. It's okay.
You're drunk on power.
I know,
Give you a microphone and Jesus.
What are they going to hit me with? Particle board? Anyway, they are far outside of the Empire at this point and heading for freedom.
Yes.
Eragon starts to think about how he no longer just wants revenge on Galbatorix.
Interesting.
He wants to right the Empire, if you will.
Okay.
Eragon has seen slavery, wanton murder. He doesn't say this, but I imagine the evil shade and boogeyman people, the Razak, are also great motivators to stop,
Yeah, you'd want to put the kibosh on that, I guess, if you had seen it up close and personal.
Yeah, I think murder machine like people are probably not great.
Well, unless they're Saphira.
Well, that's true. She's a good one.
A perfectly acceptable murder
Yeah.
machine. Because, she's vulnerable on her belly and armpits. It's cute.
It's cute. And after almost a week, Kevin remembers, shoot, I can communicate with people and animals with my mind.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So he's going to try and do just this with the elf he's had on, they've had with him the whole time in a way only a bean farmer would do without alerting anyone that he's going to try it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's like goes absent in a mental recess real quick.
Yeah, he's learning.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, geez, come on, man. At first, this does not go well.
Yes.
Because as predictably as it sounds, the elf attacks him.
Mm-hmm.
But after his near death, he gets in touch with her, and we learn a few things.
Yes, like it almost saps him. Just, it's wild. I want to like harp on it for a hot second.
Yeah.
Like, she's so mentally strong. Eragon's been warned over and over that the elves are so much stronger than he's ever going to be.
Yeah.
And her mental prowess, even unconscious, is almost enough to like lock him in a vice grip, essentially.
And, like, squeeze his consciousness. Yeah.
Yes. And like, he cannot back out. He cannot do anything except for just like burn more and more and more of his strength and energy. And presumably he's just like standing there with an absolutely like slack jawed with Murtagh and Saphira being like, bud.
We'll get there because we actually get a vision of what that looks like. So we learned she was poisoned in prison every morning by something called the Skilnabrach.
Huh?
The Skilnabrach.
I love it.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's how you say it, but that's how we say it here on this podcast.
I yes, think that's correct.
And given the antidote each morning and night, I am unclear as to why this happened. I don't know. She has put her body in a trance to slow the poison that would kill her in a few hours. I guess they gave it to her in case she ran away, maybe. I don't know.
She'd die immediately. So it's like they dose her with poison that has like a time clock, essentially.
Yeah,
like a countdown clock of poison.
Yeah.
And then they dose her with the antidote at just the right time and then immediately redose her with the poison.
Yeah, later that afternoon. It sounds like, I don't know.
To that effect.
But she goes on to say that she can remain in this trance for weeks, but the poison won't take that long. She thinks that she will die in 3 or 4 days.
Eek.
Unless she gets the antidote, which can only be found in the Elven Kingdom or the Varden.
Yes.
The Varden being the only one they could get to in time, she informs him.
Okay.
Number 2, she then gives Eragon away to the Varden through memories.
Yep.
But first makes him swear that he won't tell anyone in the ancient language.
So he's already just going in hot on oaths.
Yeah, we're testing that theory here.
Yeah.
More importantly, for the information, she makes him swear in the ancient language that he does not intend to do the elves, dwarves, races of dragons, or Varden harm, and will not portray them in the ancient language, which basically makes him choose a side right now.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, yes, of course. And I can tell, obviously, he's hesitant to do that. All I will say,
a second, he's like, okay.
I know he doesn't really think about it that hard. Actually, that's fair. But I think up until this point, he's been like, well, should we pledge formal allegiance essentially to one of these groups or the other? And I think maybe a little earlier in this section or late last section, it's very much crystallizing for him that like he set his lot against Galbatorix when those Urgles saw him, when they knew what he looked like, and when he was like, hey, fuck y'all's boss. We like just talked about that. I think he probably understands that he already has chosen a side kind of inadvertently, but also he does want to.
I don't know. I'm going to push back on that. I don't think so. There is only, at the moment, one girl dragon. You know what I mean? Like, there's 2 other dragon eggs. If Galbatorix wants to do anything with dragons, he needs Eragon. He knows that the Shade was not trying to kill him. That's why he got in front of it for Murtagh. I'm thinking that, like, if he wanted to, which I'm not saying he would, I'm just saying if he did want to work for the Empire, I don't think, like, cussing out Galbatorix through an Urgle one time is going to end that.
No, not that one time.
Yeah.
Didn't let me finish, Dane.
Oh,
no.
okay.
You let me finish, but I do have more points. Oh. I mean, he also obviously is, like, very opposed to the genocide, the slavery, the Rozak.
Well, that's all fair,
general.
but he doesn't know anything about the Varden. Like, he's not even been there. He doesn't know who runs them. He doesn't know how they run.
No, of course not. But I think what you're proposing is, like, a little bit of a complex set of jumps for Eragon to make. Like, he's...
What? No, I'm proposing that he just gets to go there without having to pledge allegiance in a binding oath of ancient language magic before he decides. I think it's a pretty steep price, is all I'm saying, to get there.
I don't know. I don't think for him where his mindset currently is, obviously he doesn't care much. Like, he already is trying to set himself against Galbatorix. The only thing he's heard his entire life is that the Varden oppose Galbatorix.
I think we see it differently. I even with all that being true, I still think it is a poor choice for anybody to decide to join a team when you don't know where they are, how they function, what their actual goals are, what the politics of them are, what their strength is. I think it's all...
I'm not saying it's a good choice, but I think it's like well backed up. I don't think it's out of
I think it's weird for her
him.
to ask. I don't think it's... nothing is out of... Bad decisions are in character for Kevin.
That's what I mean. You're like, he should realize that Gal wants him alive. I'm like, no, he never would. That'd be crazy.
Well, he did. He knew that. We know that when he fights the Shade.
He knows that, but he's not thinking about it right now.
Okay. Anyway, it's 3. She gives him the password once. He gets to the Varden and the antidote she needs to be healed, as well as her name. We learned that her name is Arya. So this is pretty intense stuff. And when he comes to, he's teased by his friends because, as you had said, he looks pained and he's just standing there looking strange for like 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's a long time. I can't believe they just like laughed at him instead of being like, oh, he's gone.
Yeah.
He's a goner.
It's like, come on, Kevin.
Yeah.
Now, here is where Murtagh and I agree. The distance they need to travel is even further than 180 miles that they've already come, and they need to do it in 2 days less time. Rightfully, Murtagh is outraged because that will kill the horses, and Eragon mentions he and Saphira can just go ahead. You know, Murtagh, you can catch up, and Murtagh's like, bro, first, I'm not your servant, so like also like that sucks. But also the soldiers in the Empire are looking for me because I've been helping you and you're going to ditch me now?
I mean, what a time for Murtagh to decide that like, okay, this is bad for me though, right?
Yeah. That surprises Eragon.
Of course it surprises Eragon. Everything kind of surprises Eragon.
yeah, I guess. He didn't ask for any of this. Murtagh's like, yeah, but I couldn't have left you helpless. I mean, the options you're presenting me, aren't fair either.
Yeah.
And Eragon's like, Murtagh, he starts pushing back and they just start fist fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much teen angst here. Saphira breaks them up and catches them in her claws. She even says that Bronn would be ashamed of Eragon for this display, and she forces couples counseling on them.
She's the best, dude. Like, she was the only one with good ideas.
Yeah. Eragon essentially asks what the problem is, and Murtagh says something again I like in this. He says he doesn't want to go to the Varden. It's mysterious, and he won't say more than that, but it's clear it's something about who he is. And so I'm now proposing Murtagh Watch 2023. Yeah.
So to get this straight, this far we've had Brom Watch and Murtagh Watch, but not Hot Ass Elf Watch. You don't want to know any more about Arya?
I mean, what can I say? I love a gruffy, angry, capable, violent, and mysterious man.
Yeah, pretty clear what keeps your attention and what doesn't.
Yeah, plus we know Arya is kind of a dead weight at the moment.
You're the worst.
Because she's a dead weight.
Listen, she was written that way.
I mean, that's why I'm not interested. Anyway, Murtagh says something about his father and is about to tell him when the real problem happens, which is hundreds and hundreds of Urgals. Oh. Yeah, they show up.
That's bad.
Yeah, Murtagh knows who they are because he fought the chief.
What? Like, so Urgals come streaming, like, out of the edge of the desert, going to pursue them, and, like, they're carrying a banner, right?
Yeah.
Of some sort to, like, proclaim what clan they're from. And Murtagh's like, I fought that guy. And then he says that that the chieftain, quote, is a ruthless brute given to violent fits and insanity.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fun new friend who's just hot on their trail.
Yeah, and also who the heck is Murtagh?
Yes,
like,
how has he fought and beaten this chief? It's crazy town. So that is where we start chapter 47, A Clash of Wills. This chapter opens with Eragon and Murtagh once again riding their horses through the night. And I'm not a horse doctor, but this really cannot be good for your beloved animals that you're stewarding for your dead father figure on the one hand, and have named after your sword fighting mentor. So allegedly, these guys love these horses, but they're not acting like it. Yeah. But on brand as ever, there's no time to dwell on that because during like a mid-morning water break with Saphira on her way back from a hunt, Eragon and Murtagh run headlong into a group of mounted strangers that they're realizing could easily outrun this like bedraggled crew. Yeah. So Eragon radios the flight crew to get back ASAP to help, and the strangers draw weapons and circle up around Eragon and Murtagh like they hem them in on all sides, and the bros quickly realize they've been effectively captured by a crew of slavers. So that they're like, oh shit, you're on a slave raid as they start talking.
Not cool.
Yes, and these slavers are under the leadership of a real asshole with the unfairly fun name Torkenbrand.
The names are always on point.
I know his name should not be so cool. But Eragon actually, like in this moment, is dwelling back on the slave auction in Dracleona. He's overwhelmed with disgust for the slavers. And even though he directs Saphira to attack them like yesterday, so she's landed by now, and he's like, get 'em, girl. He also asks her that if they run, to let them escape. It's kind of a confusing moment. But in a flurry of Murtag's badassery and Eragon's magic, Saphira scares the absolute shit out of the entire crew, such that they trample Torquenbrand to just get the fuck away from these guys in this dragon.
Yeah, they run immediately.
Yes. So Murtag takes the opportunity to approach Torquenbrand as he's getting onto his knees, and despite Eragon's like very last minute protest, Murtag straight up decapitates Torquenbrand right then and there.
It's like, metal as fuck.
Yeah. And when I tell you I was shook when I read this, like
brutal.
It's one of those things I totally did not remember coming back into this reread, and I don't remember it getting this intense in this children's book. So I was genuinely as shocked now as I'm sure I was as a kid.
It's dark.
Like the phrasing is that Torquenbrand's decapitated trunk crumpled to the ground.
Yikes.
That's a hell of a thing to read about a human person when you're 11.
It's seriously intense, but this is America and violence is fine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is fair. But a side note on that, Murtag has got to be swole to be out here like one and done decapitating people.
Of course
he has
he
to
is.
be so strong.
Of course. Yeah, I bet he has an 8-pack.
Yeah, it's a gross thing to do,
Yeah.
I think, but also I'm impressed a little bit.
Are you starting to come around to Murtag?
I mean, I never disliked him.
Yeah?
Anyway, Eragon does not share my outlook on the whole beheading thing, which is like
You're cool with it?
disappointed, but kind of impressed. Yeah. And Eragon, though, immediately flies into like a blind rage about this.
I think you mean a bean rage.
I definitely don't mean that.
I think you mean a bean rage.
Nope.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I do know that the whole beheading situation is something you want to dig into here in just a bit.
Yes.
But suffice it to say, now Eragon is very insistent that it's absolutely wrong to kill someone defenseless, no matter the circumstances. Murtag is unmovable on the point that Torquenbrand was evil, wanted to kill them, and could have ratted on them if they'd left him alive. And even beyond all of that, Murtag says, again, I'm going to quote, "I refuse to repent, and I won't plague myself over what is done and past." So, like, we haven't been with Murtag for long, but like I think we have some really good insights into what his character is, what his thought process is, what his worldview is.
These two are arguing like we do about books.
That's correct.
Yes.
We also fist fight about it, but we just cut that
Sometimes
out of the audio,
Kevin
everybody.
just holds us down with his hands and tells us our fathers would be ashamed of us.
Oh, somebody.
Eragon.
Yes, we're going to start calling our producer Eragon so that we don't confuse him with the bad main character.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So we're seeing here that Murtag is pretty like decisive and pragmatic, like to his core, and that makes for a pretty uncomfortable rest of the day's ride.
Yeah.
So we're ending the section with nobody speaking as they settle down to finally rest their horses for the night, which like, Jesus, it's about time.
Yeah, I mean, classic road trip vibes for sure, right? Like with your parents. And
I don't know what your road trips are like, but mine are fun. I enjoy a road trip, Dane. But with tensions high and our magical horses on the absolute brink of death, I think, I want to take a minute and talk and get into our analysis section to talk about some of the themes running through this set of chapters.
It's time for analysis.
I feel like even though there's a lot of running around and traveling, and this section is a little bit like all over the place in some ways with regards to the plot, I kept coming back to the idea of deliberation throughout these chapters. So when our characters first make it out of Gilead, Eragon has to digest like all these new tidbits coming his way about the Urgles and the Shade working for Galbatorix. It isn't particularly drawn out or difficult as far as deliberations go, but I like that we're seeing him like take in new information, kind of think over it, and change his worldview accordingly, you know, as he's figuring out what Galbatorix is like. It's strengthening his resolve against the king and the empire. And the new facts on the ground, of course, are helping Saphira as well to like get Eragon to the right place. He needs his voice of reason.
Yeah.
And on top of that, what he's learning from Murtag about the way that Galbatorix handles his PR essentially influences the way he's making decisions about their next moves.
Yeah.
Like, which is one of the key deliberations in this section, is about like what it is they're going to do.
Yes.
So I think that's the most obvious tie-in here. The whole group gets in on the action. I love when the themes, I think it's something Christopher Paolini really does well. I love when the themes are not just specific to Eragon. It's not just what he's going through. It's kind of everybody in on the action here. So Eragon, Murtagh, and Saphira are all trying to figure out where they should go. It's like a good group chat, basically. and I like this part. All the options are bad, but Eragon is pretty steadfast in finding a way and sticking to his goal of resisting Galbatorix. He's like, we can't just give up. I know it's shitty. We don't have a good place to go, but I'm going to figure it out. And everybody really weighs in to bring this like decision-making process to life. That's why I think it resonates with me as a theme of this section. So rather than us just getting more internal monologue or just Eragon and Saphira, it's really all three of them. It's a lively, I think, kind of interaction.
Yeah, Murtagh's in on it for sure.
Yeah, and he's providing a lot of good insight. So is Saphira in a lot of ways. And even once they've decided to traverse and made it across the Hatterack Desert, like once they've picked a course, stuck to it, kind of made it, they have to do the whole thing all over again after Eragon finally makes contact with Arya, figures out what her deal is, and like downloads the map to the Varden. So I like all this deliberation here. That kind of leads us to, I think, the most obvious deliberation in this section are the two back-to-back fights that Eragon and Murtagh have. So first, Eragon has to deliberate once again over whether the Varden is in the right and if he wants to align himself with them. I really, really like the way Christopher Paolini's using Murtagh's character as a sounding board and a foil for Eragon during all these decisions and deliberations. Murtagh presents such a different worldview in such a similar package in a lot of ways to Eragon. We joke about like what perfectly matched bros they are. So every time they talk about the bigger picture journey that they're each on, the friction is forcing us as readers to consider where we'd fall on the spectrum between these two characters. Like,
as much as they're similar, they're different in almost all of their driving like forces. Yes, as
much as maybe like the outcome is similar, it's very clear that very different paths got them to this like similar place.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a really, really smart device that keeps this otherwise like slightly aimless section kind of on the rails, much like this podcast. And it all comes to a head in the second fight they have after Murtagh beheads Torkenbrand.
Yeah, the big one.
Yes, the big one. The whole scene's so brutal, so tense, because each character by this point has kind of honed their skill at deliberating, I think, to be able to stake out their respective positions on the matter very quickly. They're both able to stay steadfast in their principles. And I know we're going to talk again a lot more about this fight. You have some other, it just like really runs through this section.
Yeah, no, it's like the heart of this section. It makes sense. We both want to talk about it.
Yeah, but I think it's worth touching on in a couple of places. So I hope everybody's happy to be hearing about it so much. But I do like to, even the small things, like the way Eragon deliberated over the implications of intruding into Arya's unconscious mind, or over making his oaths to her in the ancient language to secure her trust. Like shit, even the way the characters had to grapple with their own perceptions just to see the Bior Mountains. Like they had to like really think and like struggle with what they know to be true about the physical world to perceive the new landscape that they're all confronting.
I feel like Kevin's doing that all the time, though, just really thinking and struggling to perceive the world around him in any reasonable way.
That's correct. But I do like that. It's like just really deliberating over what they know to be true and possible. I think notably here, the last thing I kind of want to touch on in analysis, notably, Eragon does not seem to deliberate over much about undressing an unconscious Arya to assess her injuries.
Yeah.
I don't want to make like a mountain out of a molehill necessarily, but he goes pretty instantaneously from seeing one bruise on her arm when her sleeve rips to taking off her whole shirt with like little thought, at least none, like no written thought other than she looked good. Of course, he's doing all of this to heal her. Like, I understand that. Don't come for me. I get what the implications are. And it makes perfect sense. And hopefully goes without saying, it's the right thing to want to heal somebody who seems injured.
Yeah.
I get that. But in a world where you can probe someone's injuries with your mind magic instead of just undressing them and heal said injuries with a word. I do think this falls a hair into the category of things that don't age well for me.
Yeah.
It's maybe not something I picked up on when I was a kid and reading, like totally over my head, glazed right by me. Even my subsequent rereads as, a Murtagh aged older teen. But like definitely as a 32-year-old, I'm like, oh, I don't love it. Because on top of the fact, I guess for me that he did it, it feels to me like the writing is also trying to portray the scene as like teen awkwardness. Like it says that he unlaces her shirt with, quote, trembling fingers. And he's like not able to stop himself from noticing her like rockin' bod. And like I said, I don't want to make this seem like the biggest red flag of all time, the biggest problem in fantasy books. Like, God knows.
Yeah.
There are much, much bigger issues in this vein.
Oh, for sure.
But it does give me a bit of the ick, I guess, in 2023 when I don't think I noticed it really at all reading these books as a kid.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's 100% fine if none of the undertones are about attraction and teen love. Like,
yeah.
But since it's a bit weird. It's a weird choice. You're right, it doesn't age well, especially when added with all the hot women.
Yeah, they're like constant barrage of like, oh my God, she's cute and tiny.
Well, and the only non-hot woman could be hot, but she was described as rotund. So that I don't know. I just you're right. That kind of already aged kind of weird, but
yeah, I just think worth talking about a little. I want to use the analysis sometimes to like talk about obviously the literary choices where they butt up against themes. That's the main point. But I also kind of like a little.
Yeah, I get it.
Bad context.
Well, I think now an editor would just say, hey, just take out all the undertones of like attraction.
Yeah.
Just like have it be exactly the same. There's nothing wrong with the action here. But like, why muddle the waters?
He's trying to help, but like, why not just have him be like, I wish I didn't have to do this to help her, but I do.
Yeah.
And then call it a day. I totally agree.
Deep dive.
A quick deep dive this week, and it's not gonna be quick. I got a lot to dive into today. I want to dive into Murtagh and if he was wrong to kill a slaver in this section. I think this is an important deep dive because it tells us something about both the characters. For Eragon, I think it tells us three things. One, he values life and does not want to end it needlessly or unless it is very important or in the defense of himself or someone else. Mm-hmm. Second, it seems that he might have a more black and white view of the world. I think there might be a binary here of like killing bad, not killing good.
Yeah. Which
we're going to talk about that in a second too. I think also Eragon might be more principled than he first appeared. Mm-hmm. I just don't think he's worked that out yet. Mm-hmm. And third, I think it shows Eragon's a little short-sighted here because I don't think he realistically is looking at who the man is.
Yeah.
A slaver who was trying to enslave them. Or a prisoner, like after they captured him.
Yes.
Who they cannot possibly take with them.
Yeah.
I
think that's fair.
Yeah, it's just like I don't think he's walking through all the possible situations.
Yeah.
For Murtagh, I think it shows a more pragmatic thinking. I think he's the more pragmatic of the two.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he goes through the options really quickly, it seems. He knows that the man is bad and has committed evil deeds as he is a slaver. He also knows that the man is very likely to give information about them to their enemies hunting them, which is bad. And like, there's not a lot of information to give them, but you don't want any of information going to your enemies who are literally chasing you on a day in, day out scenario.
Yeah.
He makes a deduction that the information that he only has two options. They can bring the slaver with them, but that's not a good option as they are already having a rough go and need to move faster than they've currently been moving, which is very fast.
Yeah.
So that's not an option. So it's not practical because it's likely it would get them caught and possibly kill them through that process. Or they can kill the bad slaver who tried to capture them. He decides to kill him. It is, for the most part, the safest and most practical decision. Is it the most good moral option? I don't think there's an answer to that. I don't think there is.
I could see that. I think that's a good point. A lot of what I took away from this section too was that like contrast being drawn between Eragon and Murtagh, like I talked about. Like for me, it's clearly all about the writing choices, but I like that we have so much friction here for all the ways that their characters have so many pronounced similarities and are like the best of sword bros. There really is a lot of daylight between their respective worldviews. I think putting them in a situation like this, using the plot in such a smart way, having it be a legitimate threat to them, and then having it illustrate all those distinctions was a really smart choice on Christopher Paolini's part. For all the ways this series is like clearly young adult fantasy, I'm impressed that this is still something we're able to like really dig into, like something we want to spend most of this episode talking about basically one scene, because there's a lot of there.
Yeah, and I'm about to dive super into it because I also think there's something that's to be said about Christopher Paolini here. Unfortunately, I'll start here. Unfortunately, slavery has been around for a while, and comparing this to the real world questions of morality is pretty straightforward through our modern times looking glass, right? Slavery is without a doubt wrong, bad, evil, should never be done. Removing people of their dignity and, denying them their right to autonomy is wrong. I think most people would agree that these slavers deserve the worst punishments imaginable. And I think, though, that even in the real world, what someone thinks is the worst punishment is debatable and varies wildly. I think the largest two ideas I can think of that connect to this are as follows. Like, does treating evil actions or evil people with murder make things better in the world and stop others from committing evil? The second being, is taking a life for any reason at all okay?
Yeah.
These are still like heavily debated topics today in the real world. The death penalty is very much still a hot topic for the most part.
Yeah.
Both these characters clearly think this guy is like a big dig bag evil doer of the highest order, and he is. Torgan Brand fucking sucks. The tension here is in the response to that, and I love these types of questions because this is still something most people vary on from person to person. Like, even if you're close friends and agree on everything else, I think this is something where people can disagree, and there is no right answer here, and all the outcomes are rough and will feel either too intense or too lax, depending on where you fall on that. And the biggest part here, and this is why Christopher Paolini did a good job, it reminds me of the Harry Potter dark spot where the house elf slaves are discovered and no one really cares in that book series.
Yes, I was just going to say that's such a good point. First of all, way to prep that. I mean, it's really a good point. Like, I like that this is something that feels challenging, but not in maybe the way like the Harry Potter house elf situation comes up, like, where like nobody does anything about it. It's a problem.
Yeah, when compared to that, this is a way better commentary.
Compared to what?
Compared to that. And I'm about to mention I think another book too.
Yeah.
And questions about the severity of the evil, right? So like there is no question of the severity of evil in Harry Potter. Like, people defend slavery in Harry Potter. As we mentioned earlier, one of the things that bothered me about Wheel of Time, for instance, was the Sanshan and the concepts of slavery there.
Yeah.
And it never getting resolved by the end of the series.
Yes.
Those were honestly bad because they left the moral conversation at the start with slavery still.
Yes.
So, like, here Paolini is pushing past that and saying, it is undeniably a great evil, but what do you do to the slavers, and is there any excuse?
Essentially, like, using slavery as, like, one of the clearest and like most irredeemable evils to get into a discussion about a different moral question where a lot of books, unfortunately, a lot of beloved fantasy books say slavery, though, are we into that or not?
Yeah, they try to
Is it okay to like subjugate like house elves? They're like, okay, well, is it okay to subjugate a race if you think they're like subhuman? And our favorite characters say no, but the story ends without resolution on that. And that is a problem.
Yeah, I think it's...
And I love Harry Potter.
Yeah, and here Paolini's pushing past that. He's saying it's undeniably, like I said, a great evil. There are other moral questions here about prisoners of war and self-defense. But the greater and more interesting one is, what should the punishment really be here? So both of those 40-year-old plus authors I mentioned essentially couched the tension, like you're saying, and moral conversations around when is slavery okay?
Yeah.
Which is wild, because the answer is it never is.
Never.
Yeah, they both ultimately kept slavery, especially in Wheel of Time. But also Hogwarts, I think, changed its rules in Harry Potter, but the rest of the wizarding world did not at the time of that book series.
And it largely never comes up again.
Oh, right. It's like 2 books, and then it's just like glossed over.
Yes.
But before you get mad at me and you like write me emails, yes.
I hope also, please get mad at Dane. Please come for him and be like, well, I have an interesting defense about slavery. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, seriously.
Sorry.
Well, I don't know.
Write him to me. I'll come back.
Jacqui's ready to get you. I think Paolini is 15 when he starts this.
Yes.
And he moves to the obvious and correct position that slavery is bad and pushes past that to really highlight a moral conundrum about what justice looks like for truly evil crimes. And that is a conversation we do not have answers to, because they're not black and white answers.
Yes.
So to the end, like I mentioned, this ultimately comes down to the question of, do the ends justify the means, or is the way you conduct yourself to the ends what really matters? I think ultimately each reader has to decide for themselves what is right. And for me, I personally think Murtagh should have just let him go. The Emperor already knows about the two of them. They're already chasing them. I don't think the slaver mattered, but I also don't, at the same time, fault Murtagh for his decision or see him as
evil. You couldn't fault Murtagh, could you?
How can you? I mean, look at him.
It's a beautiful boy.
Yeah, I mean, Eragon, I think, doesn't know himself yet. So it seems to me he's more of a overwhelmed with the pragmatic choice, which is why I think it's compelling and it's a good device, like you were saying.
I totally agree. I think fantasy, especially when done well, includes these things where the author's able to pose the question so clearly, so effectively, that even without answering it, it feels like a good device. Like usually, or in a lot of cases, maybe you want a satisfying answer in the narrative, and like we're not there yet, but it still feels like a well thought out and like mature writing choice. And I think that's just really impressive. I'm into it.
And it sounds like you love that.
Yeah.
But where we're going to go next, people hate.
Actually, you should do your research, Have you even read the book?
What are the haters saying?
There's an index in the back, right? This is horribly derivative. Copycat.
You're just, it's impressive, the transitions. Can't deny.
This week for What Are the Haters Saying? Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hate it when the haters have points. But here I think this week, we might be having some points here. So let's dive in.
I have a bit of a guess. Maybe something you continue to harp on throughout the chapter summaries.
I don't like it. Okay. As always, I just want to say this, and I know we said this something like this similar last week. I promise this will probably come up every now and then. But as always, we don't do this in an effort to talk badly about the series or book. We love this book, which is why we both decided to start our adventure with this series. It is near and dear to our hearts. And that said, we always like to take a cold, hard look at all the books we love and think about. And some of the things maybe the haters on the internet have, a point about.
Okay.
After all, no work is
Allegedly.
perfect, right? We just talked about Harry Potter and Wheel of Time. We talked about what we loved about Christopher Paolini in comparison. And we love discussing all aspects of the books we love. So we do this to give more in-depth look at the book and to talk about it more deeply. And frankly, in a lot of ways, it makes me love this book more, warts and all. You know what I mean?
To kind of be able to seriously confront some of this stuff. And then, again, just to reiterate, because I think even I can kind of get, I think because it's just so not my instinct to like spend a lot of time like hating something deeply or like caring enough to hate something maybe. I think it feels a little amorphous to me that like really that many people online spend time doing this, but like I will say, can confirm, have like looked at your research, have watched you do this research, and like there are a lot of people who come out with these ideas. It's not just like some fringe people on the internet, one or two at a time.
No.
Like these are kind of popular.
There was
the paradox. It's a popular criticism of this book. And so I like that you're going through this. And I think maybe part of what fantasy does is encourage readers to get very immersed in the world. And I think maybe a byproduct of that is being so immersed in something that things about it like deeply bother you in like a fundamental way. I think maybe that's why fantasy fans can be tough. Like I'll admit it. I totally get it.
It's funny. This is particularly just a pivot real quick for Christopher Paolini. If we ever get to talk to him, I would love to ask him about this because just to inform people who may not know, there are like websites dedicated to hating this book. There's this thing called sporking where people like read each chapter and talk about all the ways in which it's bad.
It's crazy. It's like these like little chapter summaries or like section breakdowns, except for like exclusively to shit on every single thing people hate about it.
And there is like more than like 10.
That's
there's
crazy.
There is a lot of them. And then like every few months on Reddit, there's a question or a comment. So, this particular book gets a lot of crap. So we wanted to talk about it, but you're right. Fantasy fans are hard. And so this is probably something that's going to go on for miniseries.
Yeah.
But they talk about as much as the slavery question and the question of what to do with a slaver is a good good and evil
kind
question.
of a high point.
Yeah. There is a binary of evil and good up to this point. Galbatorix is evil, and the reason he does things is because he's evil and he's mad. The Urgles, the Razak, and Shade are also evil, so of course they work with Galbatorix because he is evil. There was like really no surprises there. The reason the Varden opposes Galbatorix is because he is evil and the Varden is good. The Varden is good because Brahm is good, and they're against evil. Eragon wants to join the Varden because Galbatorix is evil. Now, I know that we have seen slavery in the kingdom, which is evil, but putting that aside, the best villains in literature don't do things because they're evil. Most of the best villains don't even think of themselves as evil. The people and creatures who work for them are often not black and white evil. And so that being said, also the best good guys do things for reasons beside good. You know, they have some like personal stake. So I think like Batman ideology versus like Superman's. Or for fantasy book comparisons, it would be like Fitz in the Farseeter trilogy by Robert Hobbs versus Chade, right? Or Kaladin and Stormlight versus Adolin, or Harry Potter and his good idea, like his idea of goodness versus Snape, who is fighting for the good side, right?
Yes.
Spoiler if you haven't read that.
I think you got to stop giving spoiler warnings for Harry Potter, Dane.
Yeah, I
if
know.
people haven't read it yet, get off of our podcast, please. Just kidding.
No, you can stay, but you should read it. Stop, push pause.
Read all of Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, come back.
It's pretty quick.
Yeah, it's a foundational. The characters do good things or fight against injustice. That it's normally anchored in who they are, where they like the world they live in.
Yes.
It really almost is never about straight good, straight evil. So the haters at this point would point out that there isn't very much depth here in Eragon, and I would say that this is a weakness of this book. And later in the series, I think a lot of that gets addressed and ironed out. But I would say that the criticism of this book is fair. And again, I love this book. I think this book has flaws, obviously, but I don't think it's too off base. And again, I think Paolini addresses this later on. So I think this is something if we stick with, that criticism will get touched on later.
Okay.
But I think it is a weakness of this section.
Okay. I could kind of see that. Like,
yeah.
the haters basically are like, it's a little shallow. It's a little too neat and tidy.
Yeah, everything's just like black and white.
Yeah, I guess
Except for this one question, right, that we've had.
Well, yes. Like, except for this, except for, you know, I think with the mind magic and like invading people's consciousnesses, like there are a couple issues here that we grapple with about kind of where maybe the magic system is concerned, and then where like punishment, maybe where responsibility is concerned. We get into some gray things, but like the framework of the universe in a lot of ways is like binary, black and white, good and evil, which I could totally see could read as a little shallow.
Yeah, it reads just a little bit shallow. And I will say I don't have this written down, but like as on my notes, but as we're talking about this, I think this is a part of Paolini's style is you can tell he likes certain things in his world and his books. And even the things you've said, like he clearly likes his magic system. And so we've explored morality through the magic system.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He clearly likes this new character, Murtagh. We're exploring morality through. So I do think that is a weakness, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
Because he was so young that, of course, the things that he is interested in are where he has that room.
Yes, where he kind of leaves the narrative to like to breathe a little bit and to get into things that are a little dicier. Yeah. And I think I don't even know that I would say just, you know, because he was young. I think a lot of authors have situations like this and things like this that come up in their early books.
Yeah.
Not young necessarily, but just new writer, where like you're getting your feet under you. And I think
it makes sense that you're diving into the
as a writer
stuff.
or somebody who's taking on any like new endeavor, it takes you a minute to feel confident enough to like really explore things to the length and with the depth you want to. I mean, like this podcast is getting longer and longer every week, and there's a part of me that's like, okay, should it be shorter, or should we just like go? And every episode that goes by, I'm like, damn, we have a good time. Like it's fun to talk. We talk about interesting shit. Like, let it breathe.
Yeah. This one might need to be cut, but hey, the other criticism, and this is for the last two chapters and the next two without much spoilers. So you won't get spoiled, but if you want absolutely no spoilers, maybe pause. The distance traveled in the books is a problem here. Lots of haters doing summaries of these chapters and on websites dedicated to hating Eragon point out that like running from the Erdl section makes no sense.
Yes.
Like it just none of this makes any sense. And I want to go into the mathematic details, the biological ones, because it's a little boring and the details truly don't matter that much. The gist is that based on the speed that Eragon Eragon and Braum travel in the early books, and then the distances they go in the chapters we've just covered and the chapters we will in the next week, as well as the terrain being like the desert, making it harder to travel, and the nature of the horses and how many breaks they need and how fast they can actually go. Paolini, for some reason, wrote himself into a corner here. It's one of those unrealistic things that isn't a big deal to me. This series has dragons and magic, but it does pull some readers out. I think the biggest criticism here is that he didn't have to do it this way. He could have fixed this a number of ways and had them move slower and get caught up to later, potentially. You could have invented animals who could go further without breaks that were fantastical,
like
not
a
horses.
Spell or something like that.
Yeah, he could have chosen a different route to the Varden that's easier for the horses. Otherwise, in real world, no matter what happens here, the horses would die of exhaustion.
Yes.
They would never get to the Varden in time at all, even if the horses ran dead. Yeah. And basically, it is impossible to travel at the speed they're going, and it only gets more unbelievable the further they go because it's really impossible.
Yes.
So for me, I would say I see you haters, and for the most part, I guess when we break it down, I agree. For me, it doesn't ruin my enjoyment, and if it does ruin it for you, I understand. But also, I didn't even notice this was a problem until it was pointed out, and then I was like, "Oh yeah, that is
bonkers,
crazy." I
could totally see that. I think I'm really similar to you in this regard.
Yeah,
it doesn't pull me out personally, but I can understand how being pulled out of fantasy is like a cardinal sin to a lot of readers. I get that. That totally makes sense. You want to be, like what you said, you want to be immersed. That is kind of the point of a lot of this.
Yeah,
so,
you're living in another fantasy world.
Yeah, so if this is your big sticking point, I would just say, like, get worse at math. It really is giving me a lot of comfort in my life to just, like, be bad at math and forget about numbers when I read them.
Yeah.
Well, ignorance is bliss, you know, Dane?
Yeah, luckily I've always been bad at math. So that about wraps it up for this episode. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions or you just want to write us about the podcast, we would love to hear from you. And you can email us at isthisjustfantasypod@gmail.com. As always, be sure to rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts, and check out our social media at isthisjustfantasypod on TikTok or at justfantasypod on Instagram and Twitter.
Yes, and if you want to keep pace and read along with us, on the next episode, we're going to be covering Chapter 48, Flight Through the Valley, through Chapter 52, in the 50s, Ajahad. How many different voices can you say Ajahad and Dane before you drive yourself utterly crazy?
Ajahad.
Okay, never mind. Stop there because you're not topping that.
Fantasy. We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. Come on and listen to us next time. Find out what our deep dive will be. Thanks for catching our show.